Welcome to my off-grid adventures. I'm Frank, this is my puppy Pumpkin, and we're glad you're here with us today for this video about 10 tips for new puppy owners. I've had Pumpkin for about 2 months. Today is actually her 4-month birthday, and life hasn't been the same since we got her. And I just have been thinking about all that I've learned and reflected on after having her for a couple of months, and a few of those things I wish I had known beforehand. So I thought I'd share 10 tips with you in case you're considering getting your very first furry friend or canine companion or your first little cute adorable puppy. Yeah, yeah. After being owned by my puppy Pumpkin for the last 2 months, these are the 10 things that we're happy to share with you today. And yes, I did intentionally word it that way. She owns me in much more of a real way than I could ever say that I own her. You have me around your little baby paws, don't you? During the 10 days between putting our deposit down on Pumpkin and picking her up, we spent a lot of time on YouTube watching videos about how to train a new puppy. And there are usually about 4 or 5 main trainers who have a very strong presence on YouTube that you'll probably see if you are searching for things like that. And I got a lot of help from them, but there were some things that just weren't communicated as clearly, and there were things that weren't communicated at all. And then there were also some expectations that were set by those videos that just weren't realistic, for me at least, in my situation with Pumpkin. Before starting with my list of 10 tips for new puppy owners, I want to just say something about those YouTube videos that you may be watching. First is that the dogs that they're using in the videos are often much older than a puppy that you might bring home that's about 8 weeks old. And I think that training a 12-week or a 16-week-old puppy is a much different experience than bringing home one that's much more like an infant. So that was one thing that set me up for a little bit of disappointment, is expecting her as an 8-week-old to be able to do things that puppies that were much older, clearly, as I look back at the videos, were able to do. Also, different breeds behave differently and have different temperaments. Every dog has a different temperament, but if you watch these videos and you just expect that you're going to have the same experience, I think you will be surprised. It'll be unlikely that you'll have the exact same experience as them. I'm not going to say that any of these YouTubers fake anything, like train them ahead of time and then demonstrate it. I think they're all authentic and genuine trainers. But I do think that they're just so skilled at what they do, because they're full-time dog trainers, that they have mannerisms themselves that they communicate, and even the way they motion something, that just makes it easier for them to train a dog than it does for you. I just think that in a lot of cases you're going to not have the same experience, even if you watch a video with the same age and breed of dog as the one that you're going to be taking home. So this is just a tip before we get into the 10 tips, that when you're watching YouTube videos, be careful not to set too much expectation that you're going to have the experience that you've seen them have with their puppies. Number 1 tip is to clear your schedule as much as possible for the first few days and possibly even the first week that you have your new puppy. That might mean taking some vacation time so that you can really spend time with them. We could have picked Pumpkin up on a Saturday, and that was the Saturday that we were having a big party with a couple dozen people, and they were all so excited when they heard they could meet Pumpkin right when we brought her home. But I was thinking, that's just going to be overwhelming for her, and that isn't going to be what normal life will be like, and it might hurt my ability to connect with her. So we ended up waiting a couple of days, as hard as that was, and we picked her up on the way home from that event so that she could come home to a normal environment. But I do encourage you to clear your calendar as much as possible so you can prioritize being with your dog. The second tip is related to that, and that is that the most important thing is bonding with your dog. Will Atherton is one of the YouTube creators who is a dog trainer, and he talks a lot about that, and I think that's very true. The most important thing is to bond with your dog, and if you do that, if they look to you, as he says, for guidance, then so many other things will fall into place. So that was my only focus when we picked up Pumpkin, was just for me personally to bond with her. And there are just so many things that then are easy because of that. When they look to you for guidance, then it's so much easier to train them in anything. Related to that is the third tip, which is to hand feed your dog all of their food for the first couple of days and some or most of their food for the first couple of weeks. I saw quite a few training tips on YouTube where the trainers were saying you should take half their food and hand feed them, and that's probably just as good. But for me, I fed her everything by hand the first few days, and then I started to feed her about half of her food in that second week. And it just also helps them bond with you and look to you as their provider of their food, and it's a great way to just train them to sit and to look at you and look you in the eye and wait for you to give them their food. I think that was a big part of the success of bonding with her, and we have really bonded very, very much. Everyone who has seen the two of us together know that we're inseparable, and that's the best part. Other things can come later, by the way, like how to train them not to bite or to jump. Those things can come later, but I think bonding is the most important thing, and a great way to do that is to hand feed them. Tip number 4 is to keep their world small initially. Don't give them free reign of the entire house or the entire yard, but to try to keep their world small for those first few days. I think it helps them to not be too overwhelmed, but it also helps them be close to you so you can observe their behavior. When clearly they need to go to the bathroom, you can see it and catch it, and they won't do that inside. She was so easy to train because of having done that. We put up barriers throughout the house so she could only be in a small area with us at a time, and it was clear when she needed to go outside. So keep their world small initially, and another component of that was to use a 6-foot lead, which is just a thin ribbon type of leash that you keep on them all the time, except for when they're in their crate. And that was a really effective way to make sure we bonded and that her world was small. And let me tell you, she didn't care. Like, she didn't notice that it wasn't like she was held back. That ribbon is so light that she can run with it. And I cut the handle off the end so it wouldn't get caught on things, and it rarely did. So it didn't bother her in the slightest, and it let us be able to grab that if we needed to and get her to come closer while we were trying to train her on things. So definitely recommend using a 6-foot line lead for, I think it's called a house lead or something like that, and using it all the time. And I don't think I've ever heard that before, other than on the YouTube videos. I'd never seen anybody do that before, but it was a really big tip in helping us bond. Tip number 5 is one that thankfully our breeder taught us. She handed us a box that we could pick a leash from out of a number of colors, and all of them had bells on them. And she said, "You're going to be glad that you'll have this bell." And we really were, because these little soft paws are very quiet, and you can easily not know where they're at and accidentally back into them. But when there's a little soft bell ringing, you always know where they're at, and it keeps her safer. So definitely I would recommend that. We still have a bell on her. I don't know if we'll ever take it off because it's such a handy thing to know where she's at. Tip number 6 is to work early on getting them used to different things, like touching their mouths and opening their mouths with your fingers, playing with their ears, playing with their paws. And if you, from the beginning, get them comfortable with those things, it'll be easier to trim their nails and for the vets to be able to check things on their ears. And also they're going to eat things that they need to let go of. So to be able to get them comfortable with you in their mouths and opening their mouth is going to be a big help to you later on. So initially it's just getting her used to you playing with her paws and her ears and her mouth. And she's so soft. Tip number 7 is to buy a harness for your dog at a local store where you can bring your dog in and have it sized to them. I say this from experience that I bought 3 different harnesses online before I got one that fit her. And it's because each style and brand of harness has a slightly different fit, and each dog might have a slightly different build. So she only could wear the XX small, and there are a lot of dogs smaller than her. So I was shocked I had to go that small. I started with a medium, then I went to an extra small, and then I had to order a XX small. And they accepted the returns and everything. But then I later realized that you can buy harnesses at Orvis stores if you have one of those nearby. Also like PetSmart and Petco. Go to a place where they'll let you fit your dog to a harness. That's something I highly recommend, because a harness is important. You're going to want one to have a safer environment for them when they're in the car and in a seat belt, or when you're teaching them how to walk. It's just a lot easier to use a harness. So make sure you get one that you're confident will fit and be comfortable and not too tight, not too loose. Tip number 8 is to choose a vet that is close to your home. Yes, you need to find a good vet, but find the best vet that's close, because you're going to have to go a lot. I was shocked at how many appointments we had to have either every week or every other week for different types of vaccines and different treatments that she had to have. And also be prepared to spend a lot of money. You're going to likely spend more on vet bills in those first couple months than you will on the dog that you purchased. So just keep that in mind. I'm really glad that we have a really good quality vet just less than a mile from our house. So it's super convenient for me. The appointments aren't long, but if you had to drive a half hour or 15 minutes one way as often as you'll have to do it, you will likely wish that you had one closer. So that's my 8th tip. My 9th tip is to not go overboard on buying things that you'll only need when your dog is in the early puppy stages. There were a couple of things that we bought too much of, and one of them was the mats that you put on the ground that are waterproof for the dogs when they're being trained. She didn't have a problem with peeing inside, so it wasn't even that necessary, but I was so worried about her on some of our rugs and carpets and beds and things that I bought a couple of them, and really neither of them got much use at all. And even if you did use them, I would only get one and then just move it around, because you won't need it after just a few days or a couple of weeks until your dog is trained. Another thing we bought a couple of was those fences or pens that you can arrange in various configurations. But the problem was she was able to jump out of it within a couple of weeks. So we had a couple of them in order to barricade certain parts of the house off, and now they're not even needed or useful. By the way, I have a separate video on things that I regret buying and things that I am glad to have purchased for my puppy, but I'm going to keep those things separate. I just mainly wanted to say don't go overboard on things that will only be needed for a few days or a couple of weeks. The 10th and last tip is just to take comfort in those first few days of training your puppy. Take comfort in knowing that they will fit into your schedule. They'll fit into your routine, and it won't feel like that. You're going to feel like you're forced to fit into their routine, but they will figure it out and go along with the flow over time. I have a job where I can work from home, thankfully, but I still have to sit at my desk and work for 8 or more hours a day, and I was worried about whether I could do that with her. And yet she now is able to be occupied and to play with things in my office quietly, and it's not a problem at all. But I was worried about whether it would be. And she just tends to know, even when I step out of my office, she tends to know my routine now, and she'll go ahead of me to wherever I was going to go anyway. So she kind of knows when I'm going to go get a drink or when I'm going to go rest or head downstairs or something. She tends to instinctively know it, but I think it's just because she's adjusted and has learned my routine and how she can fit into it well. But again, those first few days, it won't feel like that. So I just encourage you to take some comfort in knowing that it will come. I suspect it will for you. It did for me, and I think it will for you as well. I was also worried about our off-grid property and whether she would take from my enjoyment of it because of how tied she is to me. Like, how would I get some projects done, or how would I work on things? And I was really worried about having to give up something I love so much, which is working at our off-grid property. But it is so much the opposite. She brings so much more enjoyment to my time at our land that it's exactly the opposite. And we have figured out ways to secure her safely so that she doesn't get into danger when I'm using my chainsaw or tractor. And all of the things that I used to do on our property, I still can do. And I have a companion with me, though, who loves to be around and loves to run. And thankfully, she doesn't run off. She always comes back. Because of that bonding that we've had, she always looks back to me for guidance when she gets, more than 20, 30 yards away. She looks back to see what I want her to do. But she loves our off-grid property, and I love it so much with her. So those are just 10 tips that I hope are helpful to you I'm not going to attempt to give you technical tips. I'll leave those to the professional dog trainers who have some great content on YouTube. But I just wanted to share some things from my experience over the last 2 months with this wonderful little Goldendoodle that I love so much. I have to go on a business trip tomorrow for 2 days, and it's going to be the first time I've been apart from her. So there might be some whimpering and whining. She might even whimper and whine a little bit too. But I know I'm going to be very sad to be away from her. Thank you for watching this video. There'll be a couple more coming up soon about products that I purchased that I'm glad I bought and some that I regret buying. If you'd like to see those, please subscribe and look out for them. Or if you'd just like to follow us and all of our adventures on our off-grid property in Michigan, we'd love to have you join us. Well, thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time. Can you say bye, Pumpkin? Pumpkin? Hey, 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 girl.